Hey, welcome to the Early Morning Musician. This show is for artists committed to creating in the margins.
Before their day jobs, after the kids are asleep.
From the business trip or the basement.
We get it, and we're going to share everything we've learned along the way.
Welcome to
The Early Morning Musician.
Hi, welcome back to The Early Morning Musician.
Welcome back, guys.
We just want to thank you guys who are continuing to show up here every week and listen to us and be a part of the show. Thank you so much if you've been listening
seriously.
and following along.
Yeah.
Today we want to tell you guys a story.
And I'm holding a guitar in my hands. If you're not watching the video, I'm gonna serenade all the listeners. This episode, I just thought I'd make up a 30-minute long song.
Okay, so this is the guitar solo episode, and
just kidding. That's not all we're talking about. What are we talking about tonight, Krista?
well, we were talking about different stories that we had forgotten about on our songwriting journey and our producing journey, and tonight we remembered one.
It was kind of interesting and weird, and yeah.
It was great. So
it's a great story, but it's just interesting to
we want to tell
reflect
you
on
this
it.
story about how we really realized that you wanted to get into music production.
Yeah.
I would say that before this story happened, we thought that music production was like a necessity that we didn't actually love. Would you
Yeah.
say that?
Well, yeah, because our first experience, we had no resources.
Right.
And we had no one to talk to. So
Right.
it was an extremely frustrating process. So we put out one 5-song EP. And of course, nobody listened because it was the first thing we'd ever done.
Well, Olivia and Chris Grant, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you to people for listening. And I say nobody. I mean, several people who knew us listened, but there was really no traction. We didn't even think about marketing. We just put it out into the world and didn't go over well, and it was super hard. And after that, we were like, oof, let's never do that again. That was super hard. We didn't have fun. It actually made songwriting terrible. And I just assumed after that, I must just not be cut out for production. That must just not be my thing. Because if it was my thing, it wouldn't be that bad.
Yeah, I think we thought we wanted to be songwriters, musicians, singers, but we wanted to leave the production side, which if you're listening and you're not a musician, what we mean by production is the actual composing of everything you hear in a song.
It's all the different parts, it's like the drums. What's the bass guitar doing? What's the electric guitar doing? What are the synthesizers doing? Somebody has to go in and make all those decisions and create all of those sounds. And that typically is your producer. Typically a songwriter will just come with 3 chords and a pretty melody or some pretty words. And they'll go to the producer and be like, hey, I've got this idea for a song. And then it's the producer that actually turns it into what most of us would recognize as an actual song. And for that reason, a lot of producers, a lot of times they're credited with having a role in writing the song. So they get paid royalties and different things. And we just thought we just don't have that in us. We don't have the resources. We don't have the know-how. So we're just going to hire people from here on out. And we just abandoned production on our own from that point on.
Which wasn't a sad thing for us.
No,
it wasn't
not at all.
letting go of something we enjoyed.
No.
We were just
It was way too hard. Done with that.
Let's let somebody else experience that for us. So we were in California, and you were working at a restaurant.
Yes, I was the assistant general manager.
Because
if I do say so myself.
You were pursuing playing guitar at the time.
Right, I was playing guitar some, not enough to pay the bills, obviously. So I knew I had to go and get a job, something that originally it wasn't supposed to be full-time, but it ended up becoming full-time. I just found a local restaurant in town. It wasn't a chain or anything, but there were a few of them open. They were fairly successful. I just walked in. I was like, do you guys have any openings? And they're
Ryan always said, I would do anything but food.
Yeah, that was always the thing. I was like, I'll do anything but food because I left an extremely cushy job when I moved to Redding. One of those jobs where I used to sit in an office and drink coffee all day. Left that, and now I'm I need a job, and I just said anything but food, please not food. And of course, I filled out 1 million applications over a long span of time. I got no callbacks, which there was some reasoning for that. But in the end, sure enough, I landed in at a local restaurant. Started off as a cook on the line, which I don't know if you've ever, my first job ever was Sonic. I was the fries guy. Like I cooked fries for hours and hours. That was my first job. And I just knew I didn't want to be back in that. After I worked at Sonic, I worked at a Subway. Then I worked at a Colton. So like, I'm like, when it comes to food, like I've done all the food game. Didn't want to do that. And sure enough, that's where I ended up. And then I kind of worked my way up a little bit. I became the assistant general manager.
Anything that Ryan does, he is the best at. And that really is the truth.
It's not always
I've
true.
never seen him in any circumstance that he didn't become the best at it. So he, once again, like plugged into this random environment and became the best at it, became assistant, whatever, manager. And
I did that. I worked there for, I think maybe just under a couple of years. I wasn't there for very long at all. It was an extremely hard job.
Yes, it was. You were so tired. I
was super tired. I worked, especially once I took on the manager position. Then it was kind of like that was when the hours really kicked up. It went from being like a 40-hour a week job to a 60-hour a week job real quick.
But we thought we were pursuing what we wanted, which was you being a hired gun guitar player and maybe writing some songs that would one day be heard.
Right.
But you were not pursuing production. You were not pursuing singing at all.
Not at all,
And you were considering this restaurant job to be kind of like the paying your dues right before you broke into what you really wanted to do.
Because I kind of had some traction as a guitar player. Like I was getting asked to do some things occasionally, and it was kind of like, well, if I'll just do this well and continue, like making friends with the right people, like things will open up at some point.
Yeah.
But it just kind of drug on as these things typically do. And I found myself just like working at this restaurant and spending more and more time there. And it like eventually got to a point where it was like, wait a second, like I didn't move to California to work at a restaurant. Like, why am I working here still,
Yeah, I think that creatives have this phenomenon that I notice that people who aren't creatives don't have so much, where they will indefinitely work at jobs they hate to do something that doesn't make them money in the hopes that it will someday make them money.
Yeah, we do that, don't we?
We do. So like
it's really hard.
The rest of the world goes out and pursues something that will make them money from the jump.
Right, like something that they're like kind of enjoy.
Right.
That will make them money from the jump.
They have decided in high school.
Question. How do you guys do that?
What's that like?
Like, what is that like? Because I cannot imagine.
Me neither.
Like going into the workforce.
That's why we're married.
And like actually wanting that. I don't think I have ever one time pursued a job that was not music related that I was like, I actually want this one.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know that I've ever actually wanted one of them.
Right. And I think that's honestly, you guys, we got married at 18 and I don't recommend that. But I think that one of the reasons
Just kidding.
it worked out great.
Neither do I.
I think that one of the reasons it worked out so well, and one of the reasons we knew that we were choosing each other is because he was the only person I had ever met who had that worldview where he felt like he wanted to pursue the same thing as me at any cost, like for as long as it took. We didn't want to go.
I get it from my dad for sure.
Yeah.
My dad is a big dreamer, and he like basically just abandoned the idea of working a normal job pretty early in my childhood.
Yeah.
And he pursued, he was a pastor, but he's done a lot of things since then. And I just took that away from him. Like, yeah, don't waste your life doing something that you actually don't want to do. So for me, jobs have always been
a means to an end.
A means to an end. I'm going to do this until I can figure out how to make the thing I want successful.
The end was never money.
No, even now, it's funny because even now, it's still not even money. Like, if you asked me, if you just made enough to survive, but you got to do your dream, or you're going to have a boatload of money, but you're going to have a job you don't like, without batting an eye, I would choose do my dream. Like, it's not even about the money. Like, as long as I have enough to be comfortable, take care of my kids, make sure they have the opportunities in life that they need, I'm good. But
it does kind of at this point take a lot of money to be comfortable and for your kids to have the opportunity.
It does. The economy's terrible.
Anyway.
Thanks, Obama. Just kidding.
Thanks, Obama. Ryan was in this job and he hated it and he was trying to get somewhere in music. And that's been the story of our life this whole time.
The whole time.
But he particularly hated this job. It was
Right.
the worst job he has had in the whole
But
time that we were married.
there was one day where something really weird happened.
Yeah. And I want you to you could tell it better than me.
I'll try. I'm going to try to do this. I haven't thought about this story in such a long time.
Yeah. We kind of have put these stories on the shelf in the back of our brain, but they were happening to us a lot and helped guide us towards where we are now.
Well, I'll give you from my perspective kind of how the story played out. So that day I had to drop you off at school. So she was attending.
I was going to school.
She was going to school. She was attending a ministry school in Reading, up by Bethel Church, if you're familiar with that.
This is episode 15?
15 or 16.
We have never said where we were in California until this episode.
Okay. Yeah, so we moved to Redding, California and went to the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. It's called BSSM. You can Google it and you can read all about how it's a cult and it's crazy and, we're kind of weird. So it is what it is, internet.
Please don't Google it.
Yeah, go ahead, Google it, because then this story will make more sense, okay? Because if you're not in the circles that I'm talking about, this is going to sound bonkers, because it kind of is bonkers what happened. So take it or leave it. It is what it is. So I'm dropping Carissa off at school one day, and I'm going straight to work, and I'm bummed. I'm like, dang, I don't want to go to work again today. I'm exhausted. So I'm dropping her off. And as you're climbing out of the car, you're like, hey, someone told me that you came to mind while they were praying the other day, and they had what they consider to be like a vision. Like they saw you making music in a studio and felt like that was in your future somewhere. And I remember when you told me, I was just like, yeah, but will you just close the car door? Like I got to go to work. Like I didn't care, Not that I don't believe in things like that, but I was just not in a spot where I was feeling spiritual. I was like feeling, I don't know, maybe even a little angry, a little mad, like kind of like I don't want to hear that. Like I'm about to go cook hamburgers for the next 10 hours,
And I think that wanting to be a guitar player, of course you envisioned yourself being in a studio. So it may not have jumped out at you that the word was essentially it being like yours.
Yeah. Like the kind of the vision the guy had was like that there was like I would be producing music. Like I would be the one at the desk, not just a songwriter, but the producer, which at the time I wasn't really wanting to be a producer.
No.
Like I had wanted that in the past, and like would I enjoy that? Like of course I would enjoy that. Like that'd be bonkers to have that as a job. But I never really thought it was possible. So anyway, you get out of the car. I don't think about it again. I drive to work. I get to work, and to my surprise, the gentleman who owns the business. So I worked at a restaurant. It was called From the Hearth. I think since then, the gentleman has sold the business, so he's not associated with it anymore. But there were several of these restaurants. They were pretty successful.
Lives in Ireland now. So cool.
Yeah. He's doing some really cool stuff now. But he started this restaurant. At this time, there were like 5 locations, 5 or 6. They were right about to franchise, I think. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I have no clue. But he just shows up one day. And of course, we don't really see him very often because he's the owner. Like the owners of restaurants are not typically the people working in them. And that was kind of the role that he had. He didn't work at the restaurant. He would just kind of come by occasionally. So I knew him. And I was like, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. And he's like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. And I honestly was a little nervous at first because I was like, oh, shoot, like, did I do something? Like,
for sure.
Am I about to get fired? Like, because he also went and got the general manager, who was my boss, and like all 3 of us sat down at this table together. And I was like, what is going on? Like, this does not feel good. And he's like, Ryan, I've got this question I want to ask you. He's like, this is going to sound crazy, but like, have you ever thought about like becoming a producer and running your own studio? And that was an odd question because this is one of those things where like, and I think a lot of artists will resonate with this, that like oftentimes your day job and like your dream, they don't really intersect much.
They never meet.
And
no one, furthermore, even knows that you're that.
Yes, and I experience that to this day. Like I put on a different hat when I go to work. Like I'm corporate professional Ryan.
You have your uniform.
Yes, you can tell the audience, like, I look like I'm 45 years old when I put on the polo and the slacks and I tuck my shirt in and I
got your glasses.
I slick my hair back. I'm wearing glasses. I put on my professional
it's like
voice.
A costume.
It is. I feel like Clark Kent, kind of like I'm putting on this thing. And so it was weird to sit down at my job and all of a sudden, like, this person's asking me about things that I'm actually interested in. He's like, hey, you ever thought about music production, like owning your own studio and like doing this for a living? And I was like, yeah, kinda. I was like, why? And he was like, oh, well, because I'm about to buy one and I want to put you in charge of it. I want you to run it, own it. Like, you're going to be essentially like the general manager of a studio and a production thing that he was going to put together in Reading. And I was just enamored because you had just told me, like, literally 2 hours before, like, hey, someone said they were praying, you came to mind, they saw this, wanted to share it with you. And I was like, what the heck? So I was like, I guess I'll tell him that just happened this morning. I was like, his name's John. I'm going to say his name because there's a million Johns and you'll never guess this one. I was like, John, you'll never believe what happened to me this morning. And I'm sitting there with my boss, my general manager, and I look at him and I say, listen, I don't know what you believe about Christianity and stuff, but I'm about to say some things that sound insane to you. And I apologize. But John, I knew, was a Christian, and I knew that he understood the environment that we were in, and he would get it a little bit more.
Why was the general manager in the meeting?
I don't know. It's funny because his name is also Ryan. So I look at Ryan, I'm like, Ryan, I'm about to say some weird things. I know that you don't know me like this, but like, just sit tight. And I was like, listen, as my wife was getting out of the car today, she told me that someone had a vision about me, like owning a production studio and like sitting at a desk and like creating music. And like, that was my new job. And John was like his eyes lit up. And if you knew John, he is also like a super creative. He loves like to think that like there's purpose behind things, and you could just see like the twinkle in his eye, like it captured his attention. And he was like, oh wow, like, this is great, this is perfect, I knew you were the guy for the job. And he's like, okay, listen, he's like, it's gonna take some time, I'm going to have to get some money together. There's a lot of red tape that we're going to have to go through. But essentially, the city of Reading has offered me this space. And it's a space that no one has been using for a long time. They really want someone to use it. They really want it to be something that brings revenue into the community. And they've offered it to me. And they kind of put some rules in place about what I can and can't do with it. And a studio kind of falls under what I can do with it. So sit tight and we'll figure it out as we go. And again, like, kind of the weirdest thing happened. Like, I never heard back. Like,
ever.
Like, yeah, like I waited months and months and months and months and months thinking like something will happen. I reached out to him a couple times. I was like, hey, like, did you hear anything about that? Like, do I keep waiting? Blah, blah, blah. And he was like, still walking through the red tape. We'll let you know if we're ever able to get this thing going. So like the longer time went on, I kind of started to pick up like, this isn't panning out. Like, something is wrong and this isn't working out. So eventually I just become so frustrated and I just kind of gave up that was ever going to happen. That I finally was like, why am I living in Reading and working at this restaurant, hoping that something happens with this music studio thing?
We had a baby.
Right. You got pregnant and
you were working at a restaurant.
I was working at a restaurant.
Nothing was really opening up.
We were 3,000 miles away from family.
We were really in debt.
Super in debt.
Nothing was working out.
Yeah.
We were living with another couple.
Yeah. We shared a house with somebody and we knew like we're going to have to find our own house.
Yeah. And it was a really kind of not a worst case scenario, but once we were pregnant, things got real.
Yeah, real fast.
And we were 25, I think, when we got pregnant. So we were, our prefrontal cortexes weren't fully developed technically.
They were just now getting there.
Okay.
And then maybe that's what happened is I started thinking.
We didn't, when we got pregnant, and this is also something that I don't think most people experience. When we got pregnant, we weren't thinking about how it was going to work out or what we were going to do. We were just like, it's time.
Yeah. Yeah. We were just hippies about it. We're like, oh yeah, baby. Yeah. We're going to have kids. We're awesome. And like, we love kids.
We don't have to change anything, Yeah. Like 100%. Everything's going to work out. And things got really real the longer I was pregnant, and Ryan was working at a restaurant job that he hated, and he was gone all the time. And I was going to be alone at home and you were exhausted and we were
Yeah.
living with another couple and we had all the stuff. We didn't have the money to move out, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So pretty quickly we forgot all about that studio. I mean,
Oh yeah, it was long gone. I just and like we moved past that. I was frustrated about it, but like I moved on pretty quickly. I would say, and then like there were kind of some opportunities that kind of opened up in the guitar playing thing. I got asked to do a couple larger events, and I brought home some real money, which was pretty nice. But it still just wasn't enough to make ends meet. And like with the baby coming, we ended up, eventually moving back to Arkansas.
but I remember this moment that to me was kind of key to the story. We haven't discussed this, so
Sure. Yeah, no, go
you tell
ahead.
me if you remember it this way. I remember there being a morning that God told you to go to the coffee shop, and you went to the coffee shop, and a different John
Yes.
came to you, and he asked kind of the age-old question:
Oh, yeah.
if money was no object, if you couldn't fail.
Well, actually, what he said was he said, if God gave you $1 million today, what would you do with it?
Oh yeah,
And I just remember I was like, I just kind of stuttered around because I was like, I have no clue. Like, I don't have $1,000.
right.
I don't have $100.
You had never asked. You weren't asking yourself that question. Like, what do I really want to do if I hadn't?
Yeah, if I had resources, what
the
would I
resources,
actually
what would I
pursue?
do?
But because I never had any resources, I never thought about even what I would do. And I think ultimately that's really what that experience with John saying like, hey, you could have this. What would you do with it? Because one of the things John asked me to do, I probably should have mentioned this in the story. I just now, I remember it. He said like, hey, if this does pan out, like I need you to come up with an idea of like what it's going to actually look like. Like
Dream about it.
dream about this and then come back and tell me like, what are we going to actually do with the space? So like I sat down and I dreamed like about the space, like what will we put in there? Who will we have? How will we market it? Like what will the overall vibe be? What's the message to the community? And it just like got my gears turning in a very specific way. Like I'm actually imagining and seeing it.
And seeing yourself.
Seeing myself
In that role.
Right, seeing myself in that role. And it gave me the opportunity to dream in a way that I had never dreamt before because I just had never been someone who had a lot of resources.
Right.
I grew up poor. We were poor the whole time that we were married and all of our young life. We never have really pursued money or even stability
No.
for the most of our marriage. And this gave me kind of a unique position to dream because of another person's resources.
Yeah, dreaming on someone else's dime.
Yeah, and I think that it really broke off something inside of me that was I was like believing that I couldn't actually imagine specific things happening for me. Like I couldn't actually formulate how I would get from point A to point B or how I would use certain resources because I had never had them. And I think that it's really important, especially for a musician or anyone pursuing anything, whether you have the resources or not, like learning how to dream specifically about what you want to do and what you want to pursue, it's necessary to actually creating a game plan to achieve those things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I remember we were on a walk one day and I remember asking you when we were talking about, do you think the studio thing is going to work out? I mean, I was grasping at straws in that time thinking like, how are we going to make life work fast and make it look like something we want it to look like?
Yeah.
And I remember feeling helpless, like, is this studio thing going to work out? And you said, I really don't know. And I said, do you even want to do that? Like, I didn't even know you were interested in that. You've never mentioned that to me. And it really surprised me to hear you say, absolutely, I would love to do that. And it's just that you had never explored it because you didn't think it was possible.
Right.
And finding out that if you had the resources that you would love to do that was news to me.
Yeah.
And when we got back home with all of our questions and frustrations, one of the first things I feel like you said about doing was building that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I even now, like it sitting in front of a computer and making music, that is literally where I spend all of my free time. Like that is actually what I want to be doing. Today was like a day off for me. It's Saturday when we're shooting this video. And we kind of took the morning off, but as soon as I had a moment to myself and it was like, hey, I'm going to take some me time, like I came up here and finished tracking, the next song, because that's what I actually want to be doing.
It was 6 solid hours of me time.
It was. Well, it was a lot.
It's like he's not messing around.
No,
like
yeah,
he really loves it.
I work, today, honestly, the stuff wasn't fun stuff. It was like more of the mundane, like I've got to do this next part of the process for the song. But I don't know. It was an interesting moment. It was an interesting turn of events, just because it enabled me to dream in a way and discover something that I didn't even realize I wanted. And I never would have recognized it had I not been able to dream because of someone else's resources, not even my own. And I realized like it was holding me back, not having my own resources. It was really holding me back from something that really at the end of the day, like I really want. Like I really want that.
It's who you are now.
It's actually who I am. Yeah. And I think that, if anybody's watching this, what I would say to you is don't dream from your own resources or like what you think you can make happen with what you have currently, but dream from a place of like, if you knew you couldn't fail and you had infinite resources, what would you want to start building today? Not meaning that, if you had all the money in the world, you wouldn't need to pursue anything, but like, assuming that like you actually want to do something and you're going to have all the resources in the world to help you do something, what would you build? What would it look like? And then what would be the first step in pursuing that? Like thinking like that really, it took me several years even still to figure out like, what does that actually look like? But I'm like walking in it today. What took me several years to piece together, what does it actually look like to be an independent musician and to learn how to produce, to learn how to mix, to learn how to master, and then put all those pieces together and like write my own songs and like put them out. Like it took a long time, but I never would have done it had I not had this really weird experience. And I'm super thankful for it, honestly. Like frustrating experience at the time, but ultimately like I'm extremely thankful that whole thing happened.
Yeah. So if you had $1 million and you're listening, what would you do with it? It might just be the thing that you'll end up doing years from now.
Tell you what you do. You'd make a donation to your boy on the Early Morning Musician.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and comment and share with your friends.
Guys, thanks for hanging out with us again.
Thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you back here next week on the Early Morning Musician.
Bye.
Bye.